Hello, my delicious darlings, and welcome to my home. How are you? I have something very important to say to you today. Are you listening? Okay, here goes. It's December. Okay, I'm sorry. I know I'm a big kid, but I just can't help myself. Every year at this time, I look around myself and what I see is enchantment. The Christmas season is a great time for reconnecting, for spending time with loved ones, for making new friends, and letting that inner child who stays pent up most of the year run free. Christmas is also a great season for creativity. From Christmas songs to Charles Dickens' famous story, many wonderful things have been seeded at Christmas time. In our episode today, I will share 2 Christmas poems. One of them is set in a village in the Highlands of Scotland. I'm told it is best read with a Scottish accent, but as I do not have one, we will have to make do as best we can. The second is a fantasy Christmas poem set in a world of magic princes and damsels. It is about a selfless act and the miracles that such actions can create. So get yourself ready. Grab your hot chocolate, your Santa blanket, nibble your shortbread biscuits, and flip on your colored lights. We are on the countdown to Christmas this month, which means that anything can happen. The Highland Carolers. The children gather in the empty playground. The fog of their breath sparkles in the air. Adults stand here and there beyond the stone gates. But the young ones scarce notice they are there. They are the kings today, the lords and generals. No grown-up will on this night say them nay. Tradition owes them this night of leadership to celebrate the coming Christmas day. Today, each boy and girl is dressed, resplendent, in shirts of white and jackets holly green. Berries are fastened to caps of black velvet. Pink roses in their laughing cheeks are seen. It is not dark yet, but candles and brass lamps flicker already in the bracing wind. Stars twinkle on the edges of the sky's skirts, jeweling the evening as the pink light dims. They kids talk and laugh, but no rushed games break out. There's expectation and solemnity, until at last the eldest boy, Bear 13, blows on his pipe and calls out, "Follow me." So off they set, a tribe of bonny children. Some parents follow on, a span behind. House to house the kids knock on villagers' doors that fly open on faces good and kind. The songs the children sing all hail the Christ child. But the patterns they walk are older still. It was walked when the time of year was called Yule. No person they meet opposes their will. Long before they reach the end of their progress, the carolers carry bags stuffed with food. When all is done, they walk to a log structure, tucked just inside the near edge of the wood. There, they raise toasts and dance as if they are grown. As dawn comes and rolls onward into day, then they come home, young again, children again, ready to herald Merry Christmas Day. The Christmas Prince. He went riding one evening in the winter to breathe the air and see the green holly. His horse bolted, and he was knocked by a branch down to the floor. His head bled heavily. He might have perished had not his accident occurred just outside a deep, narrow cave where I had lived for 3 years and a month now. Ever since I escaped being a slave, I heard the sound of the horse and a man's cry. At first, I hung back, not wanting to go, where I might be in danger of being seen and dragged back to my owners. But although I argued with myself, I could not ignore the fact that someone might be needing me. So, slowly, I crept up from the warm darkness to biting cold and snowy majesty. And there was the prince. When I looked upon him, I was prepared for dislike. He was proud. I could see that even when he was knocked out, I supposed that, uninjured, he'd be loud, rude and demanding. But he was beautiful. His face was tanned, and fire was in his hair. His lips were full and firm, and looking at them, I felt a desire that should not be there. It only lingered a moment. Then I turned my attention to his head injury. The blood was flowing quickly from his forehead. I staunched it with a cloth I had with me, but knew that he would need further attention. If I into my shelter dragged him down and bedded him in the cave, warmed and bandaged, I could make that half-day walk into town. There, they could send a message to the castle with his location. They'd respond quickly. Soon enough, there'd be men, stretchers, and litters. But could I ensure they would not find me? Slavery was not legal in this kingdom, but the laws of that land still did not say that those who brought slaves with them into the place should have unwilling servants snatched away and given freedom. My old bastard master had brought me, as a girl, to share his bed. When he was called to court as an artisan, it was from the royal court I had fled. The prince would not know it, could not remember, but he had seen me when we both were young, when he was the coveted, adored darling of the fine people that he played among. I was young too, but kept by the magician, called to give the court laughter, joy, and fun. He drained my youthful blood every 2 nights. The truth was that I was the magic one. I was the person who'd found the prince crying out in the castle gardens, Christmas Eve, because he was afraid to become crown prince, not knowing how he could ever achieve enough to make him worthy in the eyes of the people there who would support his rule. I should have run. Instead, I sat beside him and frankly told him that he was a fool, that all that was required to be a crown prince, all that was needed to be a good man, was to leave more good behind you than was there before your time on earth began. We'd talked and talked for hours on that long night, just like we were 2 equals, he and me. But when the guards found us at dawn, he handed me back so that my master could beat me. The thought almost made me leave him in the snow. Instead, I dragged him down into my home. I covered him in furs, left food and water, in case he should awaken on his own, then sent my power deep into the cold earth, calling heat from the core to warm the place. If I was lucky, I could send help for him, and he would never have to see my face. The walk to town was 2 hours through the snow. The old, leaking boots that shielded my feet worked well enough during the heights of summer, but couldn't keep out 1/10 of the sleet. Still, I came to the sheriff, and I told him I'd found a man with a crown on his cloak, in sore distress. I'd left him warm in my cave, but the sheriff needed at once to call his folk and sally out to see him. That much went well, but when I turned, the sheriff grasped my arm and demanded I lead the rescue party to see that the prince did not come to harm. So I was there with them when he was carried, moaning and groaning, but thank God awake. He looked at me, and I was sure he knew me. I hoped he might keep silent for the sake of pity, if for nothing else. No such luck. Mere seconds later, I was bound in chains and thrown over the pommel of a war horse. I would never save anyone again. Not that I'd have the chance. I had done no wrong in their kingdom, but if they returned me to the man who had once bought me as a slave, he'd see that I was killed, and that slowly. That's how I found myself back at the palace. To my surprise, they sealed me in a room. Not in the dungeon. They brought me food and clothes to let me comfortably await my doom. In time, I rose and walked up to the window. I blinked, surprised. I could not quite believe it when I saw the trees and the clock count down. Once again, I was here on Christmas Eve. In time, even fear couldn't keep me awake. I fell asleep, and so it seemed to me. I swam into a dream for smiling servants. Arrived to bathe, clothe, dress, and perfume me. Then they led me by my hands, down the staircase, through corridors that echoed like a tomb, past crackling fires and trees, glowing like starlight, and finally into the grand throne room. That is where the dream seemed to slip or stutter. The prince was on the throne, set serenely, in a froth of velvet and fur in his seat. But his head was bandaged, although cleanly. I'd seen him, but how had my dream self known that? He was injured? How else could I still see the pain in his eyes? Certainly, the real prince would not regard a slave so tenderly. Except, now I was standing on the dais, and the prince was walking down from the throne. He said, "When, as a boy, you saw me weep in the gardens of this palace alone, you were younger in years, but so much wiser. You told me the sort of man I should be. I have never forgiven myself that I betrayed your confidence so casually, but I never forgot the advice you gave. Your face and voice have been always with me. I had men search for you the wide world over, but now, again, you found and then saved me. I have a question to ask you, and I will understand if you want to say me nay. But if you will consent to take my hand, I would like to marry you on Christmas Day." What did I say? I stared at him, then I laughed. I pinched myself to see I was awake. I slapped his face, avoiding his injured brow. And then I sobbed until my heart would break. But finally, I nodded, and that is how. On Christmas Day, a queen came from a slave, and a prince who had been cruel became a king, who'd give his life those he cared for to save. Subscribe to become a delicious darling. Wasn't the second poem romantic? I just love a winter romance. And while it usually isn't wise to instantly marry someone you haven't seen for a decade, in this case, I will allow myself to believe that it works out. What about the first poem? Would you like to go caroling with the Highland children? Part of me would like to join their trip around the village. That said, there is something ancient about their progress, and I wouldn't want to intrude. By the way, do you like my Christmas tree? A panth, and I put it up last night. I just couldn't wait any longer. A panth has climbed it 3 times, but I have managed to save it from toppling over. At least so far. In its honor, today's word, for those who reach the end of the episode, is bauble. Pop it in the comments, so I can see how many of you made it all the way through. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit the like or follow button and click the bell for notifications. That way, you will become an official delicious darling, as well as knowing first whenever we post another episode. I'm going to bid you goodbye for now. For once, I don't have a pressing appointment. No, I am going to lie on my sofa with the light off and a panth on my lap and watch the crackling fire and the twinkling Christmas tree.